Certification Specialist for the IBM Information Africa program. I will be presenting the soft skills series. So first, before we get started, I will give you a short introduction to the platform. So with the IBM Information Africa platform, you can learn. The platform offers a wide range of courses and tools that can help you learn about the latest emerging technologies. You can earn badges, which are IBM digital badges, and these are verified proof of your achievements, and you can also include them in your CV or share them on your social media platforms such as LinkedIn. You can also innovate using the platform. We basically give you inspiration on how to build different solutions, provide you with the foundation of the design thinking process, and then you can actually go ahead and build innovative solutions using the free IBM Cloud Light services. You can also use the platform to find jobs. So the Job Advisor tool is a way for you to search and connect with a pool of jobs that are relevant to your skills. You can search by keywords, location, company, and even job role. The tool will also perform skill gap analysis, and it can recommend a learning path based on any missing skill that you may have. So let me show you our landing page. Right, okay, so here you can see the landing page. Of course, if you haven't signed up already, do so. We have three journeys, the Explorer, Innovator, and the Newcomer. The Explorer basically provides a series of short videos that are quick to learn, introducing the key emerging technologies. Then we have the Innovator journey, which allows users to create their own digital solution. This is where you find inspiring ideas for your solutions, and you will also be introduced to design thinking. And then we have the Newcomer journey, where you can access in-depth courses on emerging technologies. Over here, all our courses are aligned to the latest job roles in the market. So now let's go back to our webinar. Yeah, I'll just wait. All right. Okay. So today we'll be talking about interviews, and one of the first things that we need to talk about is phone interviews. It's usually a step that's before people actually call you in for an in-person interview. And, like nowadays, a lot of companies choose to do this before actually calling the candidate in. And that's because they save a lot of cost and time, that's required to bring the candidate in and, talk. And, if the phone interview doesn't go well, then they have the option of just letting the candidate know from early on. So although, on phone interviews, you're not going to be face-to-face with your hiring manager, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't give it your best, right? So what you say, how you say it, like your tone, your pace, it can be very easily misunderstood, okay? So here are some tips that can help you out. I'm just going to touch this very briefly, guys, because we're going to go into a lot of detail for the in-person interview, and you can apply most of those things on your phone interview. So this is going to be very brief, okay? So step one would be to prepare, right? So you need to start in advance, so if you have like 2 or 3 days on your hand, like use Google to find information about the company and more about the job roles. Then you need to write out like a list of questions that you can ask at the end of the interview as well. That's very important to show your interest in the company and in the job, okay? And phone interviews are actually like a really good opportunity to find out more details about the job, right? And so you can, just ask about the work environment, the team, the company culture, because all of these things are not included in the job description, or and that's because job descriptions are very vague, and to be honest, they're meant to be like that. So it's just one of, so you need to do your preparation and asking all the right questions, right? Another tip would be to find an online autograph of the person who will be interviewing you. You can do this by going on their LinkedIn, and that is if you know the name of the person. Of course, if you don't know, then it's okay, but it's usually easier to talk with someone when you know how they look like, right? You can also prepare and take some time out to, list down your key strengths, right? And qualifications and talking points, as they relate to the position that you're applying for. Having a few bullet points on the paper will really help you, especially during the times when you get nervous and it happens to all of us. We just sometimes in the moment we just forget like the simplest of things, right? So it's always good to put it down on a piece of paper. Make sure you take care of the basics, and that means you need to get rid of any noisy interruptions. Make sure that you're alone in the room. Mute other phones. Mute text alerts, things like that. So because things like that can actually disrupt your train of thought, right? So you want to make sure that all of these things are taken care of. Take advantage of the invisibility factor, right? So what I mean by that is that you have a copy of your resume, cover letter, job description, everything printed out. And another thing I would suggest is like probably open on a separate, like on a laptop or something, the company's page where they talk about mission and vision and their objectives. It's really good because as you answer, you can, keep relating your answers to what the company's mission and vision is. And that would be really good for you. Okay. Remember the 3 C's: concision, concentration, and courtesy. So by concision, I mean that, phone interviews are usually much shorter than an in-person interview, right? So you don't have that much time to make a good impression. So you need to avoid long answers that could bore the hiring manager, right? Because nobody wants to listen to you saying like a paragraph about like what about you or something like that. So just keep it short, concise. Concentration, again, it's about staying focused during the interview. Take notes during the call. They may even ask you, like, they might be talking and they might come back to a point and, or they might forget something and they might ask you, oh, what was I talking about? So it would help if you are attentive and you have taken down notes. So that's something good on your part. And of course, courtesy, which means just be professional, be polite, always say thank you, no matter what, right? It's also important to pick the right time. I would say like it's always good if you have some time before and some time after, like 10 minutes before, to just kind of calm your nerves down and say, okay, and take a deep breath and just get ready with everything. And also like after the interview, so if you have like 10 minutes, you can really like sit down, just go over the entire thing in your mind and even send out an email saying thank you, which brings me to my next point, which is follow-up, right? So usually between like 24 to 48 hours, you should send a follow-up email just thanking them and, talking about everything that you guys spoke on the phone interview. So these things are very important. Okay, so let's say you took the phone interview and it goes really, really well, and they think you're an awesome candidate and they call you in for an in-person interview. Now, here's an interesting fact. 33% of hiring managers claim that they know within the first 90 seconds of an interview whether they will hire someone. So, it's I know it doesn't sound that big, but it is quite a bit. And we are all very fast to judge, very quick to judge, and especially during an interview, right? Like when you're walking in, it's all about they are judging you, right? It's all about judging you and showing that because they're trying to figure out if you're a good candidate. So it is so important to make a first good impression, right? And you want to make sure to do that, you look your best. That is the first thing, right? So what you can do is make sure you can research the company's culture, their dress code, and if you know somebody at the company, it would be really beneficial if you can just call them and ask them that, hey, I'm coming in for an interview. What's the atmosphere and culture like? How should I dress up? But I would just say that even if it's a really relaxed company, the culture is really, really relaxed and everybody's wearing jeans and shirts and it's okay. You need to dress your best the first time. So be professional because it's just, again, it's all about making that first impression. They need to be super impressed with how you look, right? All right. So another really, really important thing is your body language, right? So just how you're acting when you're walking in, when you're talking to them, when you're interacting with them. It needs to be really positive, and you need to kind of from your body language, you need to make sure that you're telling them you're confident, you're friendly, you're nice, you're a warm person, someone anyone would like to work with, right? So for that, I would say like walk in with your shoulders like pulled back, don't slouch and like, oh, I'm so tired, it's so hot outside, or no, just be fresh, be happy, walk in confidently. When you shake hands, make sure you give a firm handshake. Don't be like, yeah, like you just touch them and you just kind of let it go. Make sure it's good because it's all about, it shows confidence, right? Sit up straight on the chair, so don't slouch again, don't just be like, oh, I'm so bored. Obviously, you're not bored, but it kind of, your body language can show that. Like if you're, so it might show that you're very, very disinterested, and you don't want that. Look directly at your interviewer, right? Like make eye contact. Now, don't just stare at them, but like it's like a interactive eye contact, right? So while they're talking, looking at them, smiling at the same time. Also, make sure that you nod where appropriate. So if they're talking, after every now and then you can nod. Don't just keep nodding, just like, but nod appropriately, right? And of course, at the end of the interview, it would really help if you just, stand up, thank them, shake their hand again, things like that. Now, it's for an interview, it's all about preparation. Okay, you really, really, really need to prepare. Especially some organizations, they are very strict about their interviews and they have like 2 or 3 rounds of interviews and they have like a list of questions and there are so many hiring managers and everybody will interview you, right? So for that, that you really have to prepare, okay? And I'm going to go through some of the common questions that are likely to come up, and then, and how you can deal with them confidently. But at the same time, I want to just say over here, whatever I'm telling you, take it as a guidance, okay? It's not a hard and fast rule because when you're actually in that situation, you have to judge, right? You have to use your common sense to think and to judge what is the right thing to say, right? So just take it as guidance to prepare. So can you tell us a little about yourself? This is probably the first question that you will come across, okay? And this question has no boundaries, which makes it very challenging to stay relevant and concise, right? Um, so what happens is, okay, I think we had some background noise. Okay, it's gone. All right. So a lot of times we will talk about ourselves that, okay, I'm Fatma, I was born in Pakistan, I grew up there, I grew up here, it's all like personal stuff. And that's okay because sometimes they are actually interested in your personal life and, just a little bit. But then, there are some interviews where you'll go and the environment is really, really intense, okay, and everything is very serious. So there, when they say, "Can you tell us a little about yourself?" They're interested in knowing more about your career, or if you're a student just out of the university, and about your studies and what you've done, the projects you've worked on, right? So in that case, I'm just gonna wait till, yeah, right. So in that case, you need to focus on the why, like why you chose certain jobs, why you chose certain projects. If you're just out of university, if there's a gap in your resume, you will be focusing on why, telling them why there is a gap on your resume. And you can basically start with like a condensed version of your career history. And of course, if you're just newly out of college, you don't have that. But then you can start with a condensed version of your college life, right? And all the stuff that you've studied and all the projects that you've worked on. Also mention an achievement. Every time you mention achievements, it captures their interest, and it makes them feel like, okay, you are an achiever. So do that and explain it, a little bit. Mention easy achievements, something that you can demonstrate. You can explain to them, right? Also, then talk about what you hope to do with your career in the future. Okay, but at the same time, when you talk about what you hope to do in your career, make sure it's not irrelevant to the job position, right? So let's say you're going for a finance related job, and then you say, for my career, I actually want to be an entrepreneur, and start my own business in food, and like, then it's kind of telling them that you're not even going to last in their organization. So make sure that you say your future plans should align to the position that you're interviewing for. So over here, I have put down some other possible introductory questions that you can be asked. So for example, what do you know about our company? How did you hear about this job? What motivates you? So, to answer these, again, you need to prepare. You need to go to the company's website. You really need to do all of that research. It's very important. Don't go into a job interview without knowing anything about the company. I mean, you need to, that is your homework. Otherwise, you come across as somebody who's very disinterested. Although I know you may be very interested in the job, but it just doesn't work, okay? Another question that is very common and comes up very often is, what are your biggest strengths or your greatest strengths? They can ask one or they can ask a few. So the main reason interviewers ask this question is to identify whether your strengths align with the needs of the companies and the job responsibilities. So all that they're doing over here is trying to understand whether you're a good fit for the role or not, right? Sorry, I think I was going too fast, so I'll go a bit slowly. All right, so let's take it slow. So to answer this question, I have 3 points that you can, okay, I think we had some background. Right, so the best way to approach this question would be to create a list of strengths, okay, and how they relate to the job, okay? So you can, let's say, you can basically put down 3 or 4 things, and then you can pick out like 1 or 2 that are the most important and are relate to the job most relevantly, sort of thing, right? So, and when you discuss your key strengths, you need to stay focused. Okay, so like I said, if you have like 4 or 5, pick 2 or 3. Okay, and then you need to think of the times you demonstrated that strength at work or previously in your college. So you need to focus on the problems you solved, the processes you improved, or the initiatives you took, right? Always, always have a story. It doesn't have to be super long. Please don't make it super long. But, have like a few sentences that, show some sort of story, because stories are what really engage, that is what keeps the users engaged. So you really need to think of those very important stories in your life and make sure that you talk about them in a very concise manner, right?
Okay.
So,
Yes.
uh, right, I think I have a bit of background noise. Okay, good. Again, I think there's, sorry guys.
Hi.
Okay. Can everyone please go on mute so we can get a clear connection? Yeah, if everybody can go on mute, it would just make the experience really nice for everybody. Right. So this is a very important question. What do you consider to be your weakness? Okay. No one's perfect, right? Not your interviewer, not your new boss, not me, not you. None of us are perfect, right? And describing your greatest weakness is an opportunity to show who you really are, okay? It shows that you have the courage to admit who you really are, okay? It also shows a bit of humbleness on your part. It shows you're being truthful. It shows that you're aware of your bad qualities, right? So it's actually a very good question, and talking about an actual weakness also shows that you are capable of self-assessment, which is so important in this career in the corporate world, right? Because you need to constantly reevaluate yourself and see what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, right? And honesty goes a long way, guys. When you can show that you're honest with yourself, with your work, and you can identify the areas in which you can improve, it really means a lot to the employer, right? Also, when you talk about weaknesses, make sure, try that it's something that you already turned into a strength, okay? Not something that you just found out or you're working on, because that might not be something that comes across as nice. Now, it all depends on who is your interviewer, right? Sometimes it can be somebody who's just you don't know what sort of mindset that they have at that day, on that day, at that time. So you need to make sure that you don't say anything that can be misjudged, right? And I know that shouldn't be the case, but we're all human and we all have emotions. So you need to make sure that you're not misjudged by anything that you are saying. So focus on talking about things, your weaknesses that have already turned into strength, right? So the number one thing over here is knowing your weakness, right? So everyone has specific strengths. You have some very specific strengths, and at the same time, you will have weaknesses. We all do, right? And if you're not clear on what your weakness is, then sometimes it can reflect as, oh, how do you know your strengths? Because it's kind of showing that you don't really assess yourself, right? Or it might show that you're too proud because you think, oh, I only have good things. There's nothing bad in me, right? So evaluate, assess, know your weakness. It's very important. And sometimes it's okay. Sometimes we're not aware that we're not good with doing things. Like, for example, I think I'm not a great teacher. Okay, when I have to teach things that I know, I feel like I'm really bad at it. Okay, and this is something that I realized over a period of time, right? When I interacted with people, actually, some people even told me. So ask your friends, ask your family, but especially your friends and people that you've worked on with projects. That, oh, what do you think is my weakness? Am I like impulsive? Do you think I cannot communicate properly? Things like that. But know it. So although you're being extremely honest over here, uh, don't mention essential skills. So you have to be strategic in how you're going to approach this question. You have to be politically correct, right? It's very important. So what I mean by that is, if you're okay, so let's say I like this finance job example. Okay, so you're going to interview for a job role, which is for a financial analyst. Okay, and you're going in and you're saying that my weakness is finance. Then it does not it's bad, right? Because you're going for a finance role and you're saying my weakness is finance, they will not hire you. So you can talk about weaknesses that are not related to the essential skills of the job. And the way to do that is that make sure when you're going through the job description, you list out those key strengths and make sure that you don't say that one of those strengths are your weakness, even if they are. Don't say it. Don't mention that. Okay. Talk about how you've conquered the weakness. Okay. So be prepared to share an example of a previous weakness that you've successfully turned into a strength. Again, this is about being positive, and this is about showing them that you've already made it into a strength, right? So it's very important. Don't prepare an exact response. What I mean by that is think about your weaknesses ahead of time, okay? And of course, you're going to take down notes, you're going to, prepare an answer, but don't be like, so don't be one of those candidates where, somebody asks, like, so what is your weakness? And then you go like, my weakness is da, 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 da. It's like a rehearsed response from what you've been rehearsing for the past 2 days. That is going to give a really bad impression. And by the way, that is not just for this question, guys. It's for all the questions that we're going to go through and all the questions that you'll ever get in an interview. Sorry about that. Never yes, rehearse, yes, practice, but don't say the exact thing. Don't show them you've memorized a book and you've come, right? Because this is not a written test. Okay, you're not. It's about your personality. So don't do that. Be authentic. Be yourself. Don't make sure nothing is staged, right? Only discuss work-related weaknesses, right? This is so important because a lot of times people start talking about personal things. So don't say, oh, I'm a very emotional person. I cry every time I see my mom cry or something like that, right? Because that's very personal. They're not interested to know how you are in your personal life. You need to talk about work-related weaknesses, okay, in the workplace. And if you don't have work experience, you can talk about your weaknesses while working on projects. So as a team member, right, or as a student, So you need to think of those weaknesses, okay. So here are some other possible questions that can come up on strengths and weaknesses. It's just a different way of asking the same question. So for example, how do you deal with high pressure situations? Um, that is like where a strength would come in, right? What is your greatest professional achievement? Again, your strength. What's one thing you would like to do better? And what's your plan for improvement? Another way of asking a weakness.
Okay, we have a question that's saying, can you say you can't have a weakness? You don't have a weakness.
No, you cannot say that. As I mentioned earlier, like we all have weaknesses, guys. Like it's there's nothing wrong with having a weakness. It just makes you human. And you're not a robot. You're going into an interview. You're joining a company as a human being. We all have weaknesses. It's not possible that you are 110% perfect and there's nothing wrong. No, there's always something to work on. There's always something to improve in within yourself. So saying that you do not have a weakness is like saying that I'm perfect. I have nothing to improve in myself, and whatever I'm saying is correct, 100%. That's not going to get you hired at all. Nobody would want that sort of attitude. So make sure you mention a weakness, please. again, so yeah, coming back here, so these are all the possible questions that can come up on strengths and weaknesses, and like I mentioned, it's just another way of saying the same thing.
Okay, we have another question.
Okay, we have another question.
Yeah. So how long should it take to receive a reply email after an interview?
Right. So I'm gonna get to that eventually. I would suggest that keep your questions for the end, especially because I will be covering a lot of things which you will have questions for right now, and they will be answered. But just to answer your question, sometimes it can take up to a week. A week is pretty decent, but it all depends on the organization and how they do things, and sometimes it can take up to 2 weeks, maybe even more. But then you need to follow up, okay? All right, so the next question is, what makes you a good fit for this job? This is something that they are likely to ask, okay? And it's a very simple question, but many people just don't answer it correctly. And here are some things that you can keep in mind when answering this question. So you need to, your answer should explain how you're going to add value to the company. So your unique skills and your talents would be the selling point over here, right? Especially your soft skills, okay? So the more you're able to demonstrate how you're going to be using your skills to add value, the better you're going to stand out, right? So highlight your soft skills, and by soft skills, guys, I mean things like communication, presentation skills, you know, so many things. There's so many things, right? So all the leadership qualities, team, or like your team player, things like that. So these are all soft skills, and you would want to focus on them. Again, the second point is kind of reiterating the first point. You need to talk about you, okay? You have many other opportunities before this to talk about your technical skills. So use this question to talk about yourself and show that side of you, right? You need to describe to the hiring manager who you really are, highlight what makes you unique and sets you apart from other candidates, there could be a group of candidates that can all have the same skills, okay? So you may have the same degrees, the qualifications, everything as another candidate, but what will set you both apart will be your personality, right? Because you won't have the same personality. So a combination of skills and personality is what is eventually going to get you hired. So you need to focus on being yourself, making your personality a huge selling point over here. You don't focus too much on your qualifications, because for that they have your resume, they have your cover letter, they have probably many questions where they'll ask you regarding that. Also, don't give generic answers. So, for example, some of the generic answers can be, oh, I'm a good fit for this role because I think it's a growth opportunity for me, or it's a challenge that I'm looking to tackle. This is very generic, and almost everyone that's going to come into the interview will say that, right? But you need to clarify exactly what and why it's going to be a good challenge for you, and how you're going to address it. And then rather than saying that it's just a growth opportunity, talk about how you're looking to build on the skills you've acquired in your previous roles or at university, and then how you're going to implement them in this new job and further build and develop your skills. So again, try to put it into like a story. So don't be generic. The more concise and precise you are, and the more your answers are very structured, your impression will be it'll be very impressive, okay? Because they will think that you really know your subject, you really want this job, you really know what you're doing in life, okay? even if you don't know what you're doing in life. It's always um, you never let the other person know that I don't know what I'm up to or I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, so avoid giving generic answers. Here are some other possible questions that can come up on job positions. So, for example, what relevant experience do you have for this position? What interests you about this job? Um, how does this job fit into your career plans? What's important to enable you to do a great job? So again, these are just other questions regarding the job position. And I would say just use the same method. Go through your, focus on your personality and your strengths. At the end of the day, again, this is just guidance. You really need to judge at that time how, the interviewers are. So just exactly how they will be judging your body language, you also need to judge their body language. Very important. So another question that's really important and often comes up is that tell me about a time when you failed. So this is a powerful question because it really gives hiring managers a great insight into a candidate's ability and willingness to innovate and adapt, right? People who are too afraid to fail, or people who say that, people who say I've never failed probably are come across as too proud, and people who are too scared to fail, they will never ever take risks in their life, and they will be so risk averse. And all companies, all organizations need leaders who are willing to take a risk and see how their decisions impact business, right? So it can go in a good way or it can go in a bad way. But when it goes in a bad way, this is what they try and see, how you learn from it, right? So your response to the interviewer for this will highlight how bold and innovative you are, how adaptable and amendable you are, right? So here are some tips for it. So be direct, okay? Some people may say, I've been very fortunate. I've never made any major mistakes in my job, right? But this sort of response can, be misunderstood, and you wouldn't want that. And it's okay. Sometimes maybe you actually didn't make a major mistake in your job, but then focus on the small thing. You don't. It doesn't have to be something big that, like something really major happened and you got fired for it. Like it doesn't have to be something like that. But even the smallest things in your projects, in your day-to-day life, at college and at work, you can think about that, right? But make sure whatever you talk about, whatever time that you're going to be talking about, it has a silver lining. And what I mean by that silver lining is that at the end of that story, there has to be a lesson, and there has to be, the fact that, so basically it has to have a lesson that you've learned and you corrected it, right? So be specific. In order to be believable, you need to explain the scenario, the choices made, what you failed at, why, and the takeaway, right, in a substantial way. Don't go overboard. And what I mean is, like, don't start hating on yourself and, like, go into this really disastrous, lots of self-hatred sort of mode and saying, oh, I'm the worst person ever. You don't have to do that. Just, rehearse your answer before, of course, but don't memorize it and don't say it as it is. Be genuine, but, keep it short and small. Be strategic. Again, make sure your example illustrates a benefit to your career. Avoid talking about mistakes that had nothing, that offered no sort of value to you. Okay, this won't help. Focus on the lessons learned. Of course, this is critical in acing this interview question, right? Hiring managers want to know how you face those mistakes, how you learn from them, and how you moved ahead. And they want to be of course, they want to be very sure that if you're put into the same situation again, you will handle it, right? So these sort of questions are called like behavioral questions, and they're also known as like tell me about a time question. So it's the same thing, okay? And these are really, these come up, especially if you have like a few rounds of interviews, maybe in the third round or something, it may come up. And I've seen in a lot of large organizations, they're very common. So it's always good to rehearse a few. And so for these, you need to make sure you pick the right story, go through the job description, highlight all the soft skills. So, you'll find things like in the job description that they need somebody who has the ability to work on a team and independently, somebody who's comfortable with multitasking, somebody who has strong communication skills. And then you need to come up with an example of a time when you demonstrated each of those traits, right? And also remember, you don't need like a different example for each trait. Maybe one story can actually, demonstrate all of those skills, right? You need to make sure you make a statement. So maybe you can do something like talking about the lesson learned first. So like I learned early on in my professional career that it's fine to disagree as long as you can back your claims with facts, right? So that's basically you're telling them in advance that this is the lesson you learned, and then you go into the story. That's also another way to approach it. You need to make sure you finish strong, and by that I mean that the final piece of the puzzle is kind of wrapping up your answers, right? So you don't want to ruin the perfect frame and story by ending your response saying that, and yeah, so that's what happened. No, like you need to be strong. You need to come across as strong. So try connecting your story back to the company or the position, quickly explaining how your experience would be useful in the position that you're interviewing for. And that always offers a very strong wrap up to this question. Another method that you can use is the STAR method. I don't know, you guys might have heard about it in your college. This is a great way to approach almost any question. Okay, so I won't say it's just for these behavioral questions, but it's for everything. And it's very easy because it basically offers a very straightforward format to answer these questions. So it's situation, you think about the situation, you think about the task, you think about the action, and then you get into the results. So when you're preparing for your interview, you need to, and you're listing out all the questions, maybe for every answer you can think about this. Okay? And like I said, while I went through the whole thing, there's no hard and fast rule for any, for like, oh, this is the only way to answer this question. No, it's not like that. There are various ways to approach a question, but you just have to be genuine. You have to be concise. You have to be clear. You have to have a clear story in there and lessons learned. That is the most important thing. So let me give you an example for the STAR method, okay? So let's say the interviewer says, tell me about a time when you had to be very strategic in order to meet all of your top priorities, okay? So they're asking, tell me about a time when you had to really plan all your priorities. And then, so let's say situation, right? So imagine I'm a salesperson. So I'm in some sort of sales role, okay? So I can say that in my role as a sales person, I was put in charge of a new management system, okay, which was different than what I was doing. So on top of handling my day-to-day tasks, I also had to manage this new management system. I had to enhance it, okay? So that's my situation. My task. So my task would be, so I would say my goal was to enhance the new management system by the end of the quarter while making sure that my sales numbers do not drop. So meaning that I have to enhance this whole new management system that has been given to me. But at the same time, I need to make sure that my day-to-day job is not affected, and my numbers do not drop, right? Then the action, right? So I can say, in order to do that, I had to be very careful about how I manage my time, right? So every day I blocked off an hour each day on my calendar to dedicate to the new management system. And doing this gave me enough time to work on that project. And as a result, the enhancement was done 2 weeks ahead of time, and my sales number were not affected. So this is a very simple example, but I just wanted to demonstrate what the situation, the task, the action, and the result can be. A really, really famous question that may come up in the interview is, what is your expected salary range? Now, there's no definite answer as to when this question will come up. It can come up at the beginning because they're interested in knowing what your salary range is right at the beginning. If it's too high, then, if it's not according to their budget, if they can't offer you that role, then, they might just say that, okay, this is drop the candidate there. But sometimes some companies don't say anything about it, and, till like the second or the third round of interview, right? So you need to be prepared for it anytime. It can come up anytime, right? And the first, tip that I have for this question is that you need to make sure that you let the interviewer be the first person to mention it and talk about it. Okay, so let them take the lead. Obviously, there are exceptions. So, for example, if you're at the final interview and they're still not talking about salary, then of course you need to talk about salary. If salary, of course, is very, very important to you, and you don't want to waste your time going through the entire thing, then you can ask. You can always bring it up and say that I'm interested to know what is the salary. But as if you are early in your career and if you're just fresh out of college, I would suggest not to bring it up, because at that time you're more focused on getting into the corporate world and starting your career rather than figuring out how much salary they're going to give me, right? One thing that I personally always do is that I put the question back in their corner. So basically, what I do is that when they ask me, what is your expected salary range? I turn the question around and I ask them, what is your budget? If I ask, what is your budget for this, and that my salary is negotiable, depending on the roles and responsibilities. So that kind of puts the ball back into their court, and they will most probably answer that and they will let you know. So that kind of helps. It's better to let them define what the salary is and what they're willing to give rather than you saying it and then they judge on that. So let's say, because I know I have seen candidates, I've seen what happened with my friends. Some of them, if they earn like low salary right now, and they go for another job interview after a few years, and they talk about how much they earned previously. Usually, companies, even if they have more budget, they won't raise their salary too much because they've just told them what they've been earning. So salary should be based on what you deserve, what the position deserves, all the roles and responsibilities that you have. So let them mention it. And of course, research wisely, like research online, see different websites like LinkedIn, Glassdoor, ask in the market what is the expected salary for a newly grad or for somebody with 2 to 3 years of experience, somebody with 5 years of experience. Make sure you do that research, because you shouldn't settle for something that's really, really less, just because they were offering it to you. They need to offer you something that's fair, something that is the market rate, right? And of course, if they offer something really high, then that's really good, yeah? That's nothing to complain about, right? So it's also very important to remember that every interview is a two-way street, right? So you need to assess the employer just as much as they're assessing you. And as you go forward in your career and you have like a few years of experience, you will realize, and later on as you go through different go to different interviews, this becomes even more important to you, and you will automatically have so many questions because you want to make sure you're making the right move. And but as a newly grad, somebody who's just focusing on getting into the corporate world, yes, you might not have that many questions, but you have to prepare something because at the end they are going to ask, well, do you have any questions? And if you say no, it kind of shows to them. I know it's not true, but it shows to them that you're not very interested or you don't really care. Okay, so you need to show that you've done your homework and you actually care and you care about what happens to your career, right? So work on some of the questions that you can ask. So I have put down a few. So for example, you can even talk about when is your timeline for making a decision? When can I expect to hear back from you? So as one of the questions that we had earlier, you can actually ask that at the end of the interview and see what they say and then, follow up accordingly. You can also ask about the company culture, find out when do people arrive, when do people leave. You can also ask about if they have any programs that help employees grow professionally within the organization. These things are very important. You can ask about your KPIs related to the role. You can ask about, who's going to be my who's going to be my manager if they haven't specified. There's so many things, but at least have three questions or two that you can ask them so that it initiates a discussion towards the end. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, guys. That brings us to the end of our session. Now, let me go through the questions and see what's there.
So I got a question saying, why don't employers include the salary on job description?
Yeah, because that is something that's usually disclosed, and they just want to, and a lot of times it's negotiable. So, sometimes companies just don't want to put a salary, and also it's a tricky thing, right? Because if you don't like the salary, but you are the perfect candidate for the job, you will not apply because you're not okay with the salary. So this decreases their chances, and they want a lot of people to apply. So I know it's something that wastes time eventually, but this is how it's done. But many times you can see it in a positive way. It can be a negotiable thing.
Okay, so another one is asking, what about if you ask your interviewers their budget and they tell you an amount that is way behind the amount you are expecting?
Yeah, so fair enough, like I mentioned. If it's too low and you've done your research and you know that this is not fair um, amount being offered, then don't go for it. But again, I don't want to, it all depends on your circumstances, on what you're wanting to do in life, what is it that you really want to do. So you have to make that decision. I cannot, unfortunately, I cannot say yes or no because I don't know what sort of circumstances we all have, right? So you need to make the right judgment at that time. But I would say just do your research. And if it's really an unfair amount, then it's not fair. It's not fair.
So if Nada is asking if she can say that she has trouble in managing a work-life balance when she works on something that she's passionate about.
Well, that would be tricky, right? If you say that you find it very hard to manage between your personal life and your working life, it can be taken as something negative. They might think that you will not be able to handle workloads. So things like that, don't mention them. Say no, you are a good person at managing and multi-managing things.
So I have two questions regarding the online interviews, which Fatima has discussed in the very beginning of the webinar. This session is being recorded, and I'll be sending it to you in like as soon as possible in a few days. I'll send it to everyone who joined the webinar, and you can check the beginning of the webinar where Fatima has discussed the interviews on the phone or the online interviews. Okay. Um, okay, can I must talk to interviewer about the handicap on the TV?
Can you elaborate on that question, what it means? So can I must talk to the about the handicap on the CV? So if you can please let me know what you mean. Just elaborate a bit more on that.
Okay. Let me check the other questions I am having.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, yes, of course. I mean, this is something that should be discussed, and like most companies have policies of, that they hire people based on their abilities, right? Like on their talent. So it has nothing to do with how they are physically. And if a company does not have that kind of policy, then you don't want to be there.
Someone is asking, Moses asking if he has personality issues, and the company just said that, okay, what is talk about your personality? Can he still talk about his personality?
Well, depends what sort of personality issues are you talking about. So, I mean, saying, let's say if you have anger management issues, it's not good to bring it up. If you're very moody, it's not good to bring it up. No, I mean, don't bring up things that can jeopardize you getting hired, because at the end of the day, they're looking for somebody who's easy to work with.
Can we have 2 minutes to type your answer to Abdul Rahman regarding the handicap, mentioning the handicap in CVs, so he can read it?
Yeah. So guys, just give me a second.
Okay, I'll check other questions. So whoever is asking about the certificates, well, basically we have a criteria that is usually calculated after each and every webinar. After each and every webinar, I get a report, and there is some sort of criteria to give certificates to specific people. We don't just give them randomly to everyone who has joined. And that criteria just calculates the attentiveness of each one of the attendees, and upon that, the certificates are created. Can you please, hello, you don't answer my questions. Can you please send it again? I'm receiving a lot of questions, so please send it again so I can see it one more time.
Okay, I have answered Abdurrahman. Yeah, okay, so I just read that question about I once applied for a job and the first interview was an online form to be filled out. In such a situation, how do you handle the salary question? So I'm guessing that's not an interview, that's just an online form for application submission. And that is too early to talk about the salary. You're not gonna know. Salary only comes in when you get your first interview. And by interview, I mean that people actually call you to talk to you, right? So that's just an online application, and usually these things are not talked about on that. I know there are some forms that say, can you mention your expected salary? So I think you should just research the market and put in like a good value, like whatever is the market rate.
Okay, I have a question. How do you answer the aptitude test?
Well, that you have to, depends which organization it is, what sort of aptitude test it is, and you need to prepare for it. That is something that you need to study and prepare for, because I know there are a lot of logic questions, there are mathematical questions, there are grammar questions. So you will need to prepare for that.
So someone is asking about a webinar on how to write a professional CV or resume. We already had a webinar in the first webinar series. So this is the second webinar series, but in the first webinar series we had a webinar on how to write a resume. So I'll share a link with you guys on the chat that you can go and check from the first webinar series folder. Just go to how to write a resume webinar folder as well. You can check the recording and the presentation from there. I just sent the link there. I'm getting a lot of questions, so it might be hard for us to answer all of these questions one by one, so just be patient. Would it be wrong to leave the salary field empty on an online application?
No, it's not wrong. You can, if it's not a mandatory field, you can leave it empty. Doesn't matter.
Okay, so we had a question from Benjamin. So basically, as an IBM Digital Nation Africa applying for an intern position at IBM, what are the stages of interview and likely areas of questions to expect? He's applying for a job as an intern position in IBM. Is there anything that he should be?
I would say just prepare, go through this webinar, prepare all the questions. But the best thing I would say is just to be yourself. Seriously, if you love DNA, that would really help. Of course, be passionate about DNA. When you go for the interview, let the person know that you've done a lot of courses, demonstrate what you've done on DNA, what solutions you've built, what excites you about DNA, and why you're such a perfect candidate to be a DNA ambassador. Just love DNA.
Okay, we have a question from Robert and asking me if he can share these webinars to other audiences for learning purposes. Yes, of course. These webinars, recordings, and material is publicly available to everyone who would want to learn about a specific topic. So yeah. So what about age, if it's a factor?
Well, yeah, it depends what position you're applying for and how many years of experience that they want. So, I mean, if you're a fresh graduate, you cannot apply for a position that has that requires 5 or 6 years of experience, because that's not exactly what they're looking for, right? So it depends on the role. All right, so is it okay? Sorry, what is that? Okay, so is it okay to refuse to tell your interviewer your previous salary? It depends. I mean, if they want to know, okay, but it's a very personal question, and it will come up. Obviously, you will tell them how much you've been earning, or you know, it might come up, but it's something that you don't have to talk about. You can say that, you know, my salary is negotiable. Please tell me what is your budget. So you can, don't be rude and say, no, I'm not going to tell you anything, like with that sort of tone. Be nice to say, you know, like, I'm willing to openly negotiate my salary, you know. And then obviously, you know, if you really want this job and they keep asking you, tell us your salary, then you just tell them your salary. There's nothing more you can do. So just tell them what you're earning. All right, so what about if you have the talent but don't have the citizenship to the country? Well, that is something I'm so sorry I cannot answer, but you can always apply to different countries, and sometimes you don't have to have the citizenship of that country to actually go and work there. Like, I work in the UAE. I don't have UAE citizenship, right? But that's okay. Um, these days, countries are really progressive and they're welcoming people from all religions and nationalities and cultures to come and work together. So make sure, just, you can always apply. Okay. Okay, is there any other questions? What is what will be the answer when the question is, what is your pretended salary? Again, like guys, I think it's the same question. You need to research the market, see what is the market rate, and then just say that. Say, you tell them a range, like from starting from a low end to a high end, and say that this is my range. But research the market. Can you say your weakness is getting frustrated easily with work colleagues who tend up to be slow in delivering their part of job, which affects yours? No, you cannot say that. Only because I know that can be a weakness, but no, don't say that. It's because it might come across as that you're someone who cannot work with people at all. But you can talk about how you turn that weakness into a strength. So you can actually talk about how that used to be your weakness, that you used to get easily frustrated. And then what you did was you sat everybody down and you took the initiative to talk things out and make them understand your point of view. And after that, you guys had like a great time and you worked really well as a team. So that is something that you can probably say. Is it necessary to give references on your past company where you had issues? I mean, if they ask, yes. I mean, it really depends. So if the question is about a challenge you face, and again, if it has a positive outcome, then you can talk about it. But if it has a really negative outcome, then it's not something that you would want to bring up. What is the difference between a resume and a CV? So this was covered in my webinar for how to write your resume. But just to give you an answer, a CV is a long version of your work history, your education. It's really, really long and very detailed, while resume is like 1 to 2 pages, very short, concise, and to the point. Can you give an example about a time you had a conflict with your team member? Well, again, I would say you use the star method, right? Like, I cannot give an example in terms of, because my examples would be different than yours, but what you can do is you can use the star method. So let me just show you over here. Yeah. So you can talk about the situation. What was the situation? So you were in a group, and you guys were working together, and let's say you didn't get along with somebody too well. What was the task that you guys were working on? And then you can talk about the action you took to correct that situation, right? So what you did is like you went to that colleague of yours or team member and try to sort out the issue between you two. And because you took the initiative of actually solving this problem, your colleague really appreciated it and tried working with you better. And then you can say that the lesson that I've learned from this is that it's always, when you have issues with a team member or a colleague, it's always good to just talk about it, because sometimes there's just misunderstandings being created. But talking about it and making them feel you actually care for them solves all the problems. So maybe you can focus on something like that. Okay, let's check if we have more questions. All right. Can you also talk about some of the malpractice that was going on in your previous company leading to your exit? Yeah, of course. I mean, you can say that some of their rules and regulations and policies were something that you did not agree with. And it's all about a part, this is all a part of being human, right? So you tell them why you didn't agree with it. And these are not the principles that you stand for. And it's really good if it's something, that you don't agree with and you don't agree with. And of course, you don't again want to be a part of a company who has similar policies or who has similar values, right? So not a problem. What's the question? If a startup hires you and promises you that they will give you a percentage of shareholders, how do you handle it? I mean, you agree to it, I guess. I mean, if you can please elaborate on what do you mean by how do you handle it? And they're offering you their shares. It's a good thing, right? Can I give a value that they have not mentioned in their job description? Do you mean a value on salary? Okay, so we have a question. I am completing my internship. How do I go about asking for a job offer? I mean, you're already in an internship. Meet your manager. Say that you really want to work here. So what's the plan? Is there any opportunity? Just be honest, be open, especially if you have demonstrated that you have worked very hard and you are doing really well. There's no shame in just asking your manager for some time and having that conversation. Is it okay to give your interviewer compliments such as you smell nice? You smell nice might be a bit personal. Um, you never know how they might take it. But you can say, "Oh, you look really nice." Um, but yeah, don't say you smell nice. Okay, let's see what other questions we have.
So someone is asking about links to access job advertisements. As you know, guys, Fatima has mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, while introducing the Digital Nation Africa platform, there is in the new caller section, you will find the job advisor tool that will help you find jobs in your country, basically. So please go and check that, and hopefully you will see the job that matches your interest. Okay.
Okay. How do you respond to How do you respond to questions relating to furthering education? Yeah, if they ask you, okay, do you plan on taking your education further? Always say yes. Say yes, I'm interested. But I'm thinking of doing it part time because there's always more to learn. You have to stay relevant to the market. You have to make sure you have the latest skills. So learning is something that's really important. Okay. Okay, what other questions do we have? What is the standard salary for graduates? I'm sorry, but this is something that unfortunately I cannot answer because it depends from country to country. So you really have to research in your country, like something that might be starting salary in the UAE might be different from Kenya. Something that's in Kenya might be different from South Africa. Same, so it just varies everywhere. All right, so we have another question. I joined the company as an intern, then they employed me as a full staff. How will I command the deserved value and respect in the company? By doing the best work possible. Your work should speak for itself. So if you want respect and you want to be valued, then you need to deliver at the best of your ability. Make sure that you are a good person, you're genuine. You have a good personality, people don't hate you. You have to be yourself and you have to be serious about your work and deliver. Please, is it too late for me at the age of 52 to get IT as IT as a junior developer. No, of course not. It's never too late to learn. It's never too late to do something in life. Age is just a number. Don't let that be a roadblock. When I was in university, I was actually taking a class, and you won't believe, like in my class, there was a 62-year-old man, and he used to come every day to learn, and everybody respected him so much because he was man. Age is just a number. Don't let it stop you from achieving your goals. Go. Good luck. Okay, let's see if we have more questions. Okay, how do you ask about organizations' culture, especially how they manage politics and ethics? Some organizations believe in giving commands and do not believe in engaging one's thoughts. How can one get more information on that? Unfortunately, just like you are not going to be talking about all your bad points and your weaknesses related to the job role, even the company is not going to talk about what really their values are, right? The only way to find out is talk to existing employees, right? So what you need to do is you need to see if you have any connections within the company to ask them how the environment is, how the culture is. But at times, let me tell you, just make sure that the person that you're asking is actually genuine, because sometimes people just don't want you to be successful. So you have to really see who you're asking. Another resource that I usually use is Glassdoor. So Glassdoor, read reviews of a company on Glassdoor. They usually are more or less a good indicator of what the company culture is like. If there are only negative comments and they're just filled with negativity, then most likely the company's work culture is a bit toxic, So have a look at that. But other than that, you just kind of have to take that risk, right? It's all about taking that risk. So yeah. All right. Do we have any other questions? How can one cope in an organization with no or little professional corporate culture? Well, that would be hard, right? If they're not professional at all in anything that they're doing, they're cheating their employees. That is really hard. I have some friends who are in very, very toxic cultures, and it's unfortunate because sometimes you just have to stay because you have to stay. But I always recommend, looking for better opportunities. If the company's not professional, if they don't take care of their employees, then really it's not something that it's not something where you should stay. How do you deal with a member of the interview board who try to intimidate you during an interview? Well, it depends how they're trying to intimidate you, right? If they are pointing at your weaknesses and saying that you're are making you feel less of a person, making you feel like you're not capable, then that's something that's very negative. But if they're just grilling you, asking you questions one after the other, and saying that, just trying to get the best out of it, because sometimes people tend to put you under a lot of pressure. That's what they do to see how you answer, how you react. So it depends. And concerning the age bracket, is it advisable to apply for a job far below your age and expertise so you qualify? It depends, because sometimes I had a webinar on resumes and how to apply for a job, and that I spoke about how they have an automatic system. So when you put in your resume online, they have a way of screening. So they pick up keywords. So sometimes what happens is they might pick up that, you're not a recent grad, right? And your application can just, drop right there. But of course, if you are, if you know somebody and you're willing to enter the job market at that level, then that's okay. But these days it's just so complicated because you do everything online and there are so many machines that are monitoring keywords. So it can get a bit tricky. So I have another question. What should be your best answer when asked something you know or much idea about? Again, it depends. Hopefully, it's not related to your field of expertise. So again, I'll take the finance example, right? So if you're going for a financial analyst job and they're asking you something about finance that you have been dealing with and you don't know the answers, then that would be great. But if you, if they're talking about something that you haven't really done, then you can be straightforward and you can say that I apologize, but this is something that I haven't done in my previous role, but I'm willing to learn, and I really, this is what I want to do. I want to learn new things. I want to build on the skills that I already have. Always be honest, because if you're going to say that, no, or something like that, and then in your actual job, you don't know it, it can fire back badly. So just be genuine.
Okay, great job, Fatima. I think we covered almost all the questions that we have. So guys, I've sent 2 links on the chat. One of them, which is ibm.biz/presentations recordings. On that link, you can find all of our webinars, presentations, recordings. And this webinar, we are having it recorded, and I'll share its material soon in a few days on the same link, okay? Also, don't forget to go to the survey link that I have just shared on the chat and give Fatima some feedback. So thank you all for joining, and see you on our next webinar next Thursday on how to build a smart home IoT application. Okay, so see you guys then. Hope you enjoyed our presentation today, and have a nice day and a nice weekend. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.